Laughter. That ugly, echoing kind that fills a room too quickly, too loudly, and you just know it's not with you. It's at you. I was still holding the wine glass when it happened. Not drinking. Just holding it. That fake crystal stem twisted between my fingers like it could anchor me. It couldn't. "Hey man," he said, voice booming, perfectly timed to catch the lull between music and applause. "Did you know your wife tells everyone at work you're an artist?" More laughter. "She said you work from your garage." He chuckled. Didn't know Etsy was still a thing. I didn't move. Didn't blink. Just felt the room shift, heads turning, eyes scanning, people enjoying their free drinks a little more now that someone had become the entertainment. He was standing 6 feet away, confident, smug, champagne flute in one hand, the other tucked into his pocket like he was modeling for the cover of some overpriced leadership memoir. I didn't even know his name, and that hurt more than I expected, because he clearly knew mine. I looked toward her, my wife, and she just smiled. Not a cruel smile. Not a supportive one either. Just that hollow, polite grin people wear when they've already decided not to get involved. That was the moment the whole room felt off, tilted, wrong. I'd been standing in a war zone and didn't realize until the first shot landed. But I wasn't about to argue. I wasn't going to trade barbs. I don't win those. I never have. I'm not the snappy comeback guy. I've never known how to fight with charm, or fists, or swagger. What I did have was her phone, unlocked, forgotten in her coat pocket an hour ago, when she slipped off to check on catering. It was sitting in my jacket the whole time, and it had been buzzing. Again, and again, and again. I didn't plan to look, but when I did, there he was, the same guy now mocking me. Photos, messages, audio clips, and one video taken in a hotel room with a view I could identify in half a second. Because we spent our anniversary in that exact room last year. He was laughing about my garage, in a suit I recognized, because it had been hanging in my closet. I didn't speak. I just stepped forward, quietly, calm. The music faded again, perfect timing, as if the universe wanted to hear what I had to say. Instead of words, I took her phone from my pocket and tapped the screen. The video started to play. I turned it outward. Silence. He stopped smiling. She dropped her glass. And the jazz trio, halfway through a smooth cover of Moondance, just stopped. That's how it began. Not with yelling, not with a fight, but with a screen, a room full of cowards, and a man finally done pretending not to notice. The video didn't last long, maybe 45 seconds. But in that short time, it did more damage than any fight, any rumor, or any whispered accusation could have ever done. It wasn't graphic, not in the way people expect, but it didn't have to be. It was them. In that hotel room, her sitting at the edge of the bed, smiling up at him in a way I hadn't seen in years, wearing a necklace I bought her for Christmas. He was filming, laughing, saying her name like it was some kind of punchline. Her voice was soft, affectionate, entirely unfamiliar. She never used that tone with me. Not in a long time. When I turned off the screen, no one moved. Not even her. She just stood there, completely still, like if she didn't breathe, maybe this moment would undo itself. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I simply slipped the phone back into my jacket, turned, and walked toward the elevator. The room stayed quiet behind me, even the clink of glasses had stopped. But as the elevator doors slid closed, I heard her voice for the first time in what felt like hours. "Wesley, wait. It's not what it looks like." That line. That horrible, unoriginal, cliché line. I actually smiled. Not out of joy or smugness, but out of disbelief. After everything, that's what she had ready for me? She didn't follow me down. I half expected her to burst into the lobby and chase me to the curb, but she didn't. Instead, I stood under the blinking marquee of the venue and stared out at the street, watching cars go by like they were part of someone else's life. My hands were shaking, not with rage, but with something colder, something emptier. The truth hadn't just landed. It had settled. Back at home, the house felt like a stranger's. Everything was too clean, too quiet. I sat in the dark kitchen, still dressed in my suit, and stared at the microwave clock. I didn't even realize an hour had passed until my phone buzzed. It was her. A single message. "Please come back. Let's talk." It was just a joke. Please. A joke. That word burned. Not because I believed her, but because I realized maybe that's what I had become to her. A running joke. The quiet husband with the garage studio, the one who didn't understand company culture, the one who wore too tight collars and spoke too softly to command attention. At 3 a.m., the front door opened. She walked in slowly, heels in hand, mascara smudged, dress wrinkled like she'd rolled around in regret. She didn't say anything at first. Just looked at me, eyes wide and pleading, like I was supposed to save her from the wreckage she'd created. I wasn't going to let it get serious, she finally whispered. I tilted my head. So it was real? She nodded. But only a few times. I swear. It's not, it wasn't. Love. I offered. She blinked. No, she said. It wasn't that. It was just fun. I didn't yell. I didn't even get up. I just said what had been sitting on my tongue since I pressed play on that video. You laughed at me tonight. You didn't even try to stop it. She opened her mouth but said nothing. And the way you looked at him? That wasn't about fun, Camille. That was intimacy. The kind we haven't had in years. She started crying. The messy kind. The kind you use when you realize the consequences have teeth. I let her cry. I let her stand there in our perfect kitchen with its perfect backsplash and fake hardwood floor, sobbing into her cold hands like it might undo the past year of secrets. But what she didn't know, not yet, was that I hadn't come home empty-handed. I had downloaded everything from her phone. Not just the video. The messages. The photos. The calendar entries. The rideshare logs. Everything. It was all stored safely on a drive. And not because I planned to blackmail her or use it in some grand courtroom drama. No. Because I needed to see fully and clearly who she had become, and if what I uncovered next is what I think it is. Then the party was just the tip of the iceberg. That night, I couldn't sleep. I didn't even try. I sat on the living room floor, hunched over my laptop like a detective in a movie, except there was no dramatic music, no neon-lit montage, just the constant hum of silence and the soft clicking of keys. I opened every message thread on Camille's phone that I had backed up. And I mean everyone. Her friends. Her family. Her coworkers. Some names I recognized. Others I didn't. I scrolled through emojis, passive-aggressive comments, group chat gossip. But my focus, obviously, was on the one thread that mattered most, Landon Bell. Their messages went back months. Nearly a year. But it wasn't the flirting that shocked me, it was the normality. They talked like a couple. About mundane things. Office politics. Who wore what? Where to get lunch. What show to binge. When she should accidentally wear a certain blouse. And once, this chilled me, she told him I was so sweet and weirdly trusting and that I would never suspect a thing. He replied with a wolf emoji. I didn't even know grown men used those. It became obvious that this wasn't some casual mistake. It wasn't a heat-of-the-moment affair or something born out of boredom. It was curated, maintained, hidden in plain sight. And what really made my skin crawl? The way he wrote about me. I was a character in their little side play, Garage Guy, as he called me. The harmless, soft-spoken husband who probably believed in karma and wind chimes. I should have been angry. I should have screamed, smashed something. But instead, I felt something worse, detachment. Like I was observing someone else's story, reading my own humiliation as if it were fiction. And then something shifted. Very deep in their messages, there was a reference to a shared folder. A Dropbox link. She had sent it to him weeks ago. The text beside it read, just in case I ever get cold feet winking face. That folder was still live. And what I found inside didn't just confirm the affair, it outlined it. Photos. Screenshots. Journals. Even voice notes. She recorded things. About me. About her feelings. About the thrill of hiding. One voice clip was barely 12 seconds long, but it shattered something inside me completely. It started with her laughing. Then she said, Wesley still thinks we're doing okay. He's so. I don't know. Innocent. Sometimes I feel guilty. Other times, it's like, I need to do this. Just to remember who I am. To remember who she was? I sat frozen, hands clenched, heart calm but cold. Not because I didn't care, but because something in me had snapped. I realized Camille hadn't just cheated on me with Landon. She had rewritten our entire relationship in her head. Turned me into a placeholder while she built a parallel version of herself. One that laughed behind my back, documented my cluelessness, and quietly erased me from the narrative of her real life. At 6 a.m., she came downstairs, bleary-eyed and in one of my old sweatshirts, the one she used to wear when we'd make pancakes on Sundays. She saw me still awake and said, You didn't come to bed. I didn't look at her. I didn't speak. She sat on the edge of the couch, watching me. Wes, are you going to say anything? And then, still staring at the screen, I spoke. Quietly. Tell me what you meant. About remembering who you are. Her breath hitched. She knew. She knew exactly what I had listened to, and her silence confirmed it more than any denial ever could. I closed the laptop. "Don't lie," I said, standing slowly. "I already know too much to be lied to again." She reached for my hand. I pulled away. "Wesley, I swear I never meant to finish that sentence and I'm walking out." She stopped. I didn't need more apologies. I needed truth, but not the sugar-coated version people offer after getting caught. I wanted the raw kind. The kind that leaves no room for excuses. And she wasn't ready to give that. So I made a decision, one I never imagined I'd make. That night, I drove to the one place I hadn't been in over a decade, my brother's cabin on Lake Newhall. I didn't tell her I was going. I didn't even leave a note. Because this wasn't about hurting her. It was about remembering who I was before I became a character in someone else's secret. The drive to the cabin took 4 hours. I didn't speak a word. Didn't play music. I just listened to the sounds of the tires scraping along cracked asphalt, the faint creaking of my old steering wheel, and the occasional voice in my head asking the same thing on repeat. What if she's still hiding more? And deep down, I knew the answer was yes. Camille wasn't the kind of person who only left one breadcrumb trail. If she'd felt safe enough to store files in a shared cloud folder, who knew what else she'd archived, saved, whispered, or buried? The cabin was just as I remembered it, small, creaky, pinewood scented. My brother, Joel, had bought it cheap a decade ago, fixed it up, and then abandoned it when his real estate career took off. No one had touched the place in years. That made it perfect. I unlocked the door, stepped inside, and let the silence wrap around me like a thick blanket. No Wi-Fi. No cell signal. Just wind against the windows and birds I couldn't name calling out in the distance. I set up camp in the kitchen, if you could call an old kettle, a dusty chair, and a rickety table camp. For a moment, I thought maybe I'd just let it all go. Maybe I'd just sit here for days, drink instant coffee, read a book, and fade from the edges of Camille's double life. But then I remembered what I'd tucked into my bag before leaving, the flash drive. It was labeled in Sharpie, cm.wes, private. It wasn't from her phone. This was something I'd found accidentally the night before, in a drawer in her home office, shoved under old receipts and expired coupons. I wasn't sure if it had anything on it at all. But when I plugged it into my laptop, I felt the same sinking weight I had in the ballroom, when the first laugh hit me like a slap. The folder opened with a delay. Inside, for subfolders, titled plainly, Home, Work, Vaki, and one with no label at all. I clicked the unlabeled one. Inside were 3 videos. No titles. No timestamps. Just thumbnails, blurry, grainy, muted. I hesitated, then clicked. It opened on Camille, alone, sitting on our bedroom floor. She wasn't dressed up. She looked normal. Sweatshirt, ponytail, no makeup. The kind of image most husbands might find endearing comforting. But she wasn't smiling. She stared at the camera and whispered, "If anyone ever sees this, I want them to know. I didn't plan for it to go this far. I thought it would be a phase." My breath caught in my chest. She went on. "I thought Wesley would change. I thought maybe if he saw me getting attention, he'd fight harder. He'd become more. I don't know, assertive. But he didn't. He just stayed him." She paused, bit her lip, looked down. I wanted him to chase me. But instead, he just gave space. Like always. So I filled it. Then came something I wasn't prepared for. She leaned forward, lowered her voice even more, and said, "It's not just Landon." I froze. I told myself I'd stop after the second time. And then the third. And then I stopped counting. She looked straight into the lens and whispered, "I don't even know what I want anymore." The video ended. I sat motionless. The walls around me, the old wood and rusted nails, suddenly felt like they were watching me, like the cabin itself had just witnessed a confession meant for no one. My hands felt numb. Not from cold. From truth. Not just Landon. More than one. This wasn't betrayal anymore. It was disintegration. The woman I had loved, protected, supported through her career moves, family losses, and dreams, she hadn't just cheated. She had unraveled everything we were and buried it beneath a persona I never saw coming. And what broke me wasn't the acts. It was that she had filmed this herself. Knowingly. Deliberately. Like she needed to document her own descent in case one day someone, me, demanded an answer. There was one video left. I didn't open it yet. Because I had a terrible feeling that the next one wasn't just going to hurt. It was going to redefine everything I thought I knew about her. About us. About how far someone would go when they're no longer afraid of being caught. I didn't watch it right away. I stared at that thumbnail for nearly 20 minutes, sitting in that cold cabin kitchen with my laptop casting a pale glow across the cracked table. The screen showed only a blurred freeze frame of Camille's knees folded beneath her, hands partially covering her face. It looked harmless, almost vulnerable. But I had a feeling, the kind that digs under your skin and settles like ice, that this video wasn't like the others. It wasn't about regret. It wasn't even about betrayal. It was about control. When I finally double-clicked it, there was no preamble. No quiet lead-in. Just Camille, mid-sentence, already speaking like I'd interrupted her. And if he finds this, it means he was never supposed to see it. Her eyes locked on the camera. No sadness. No tears. Just calm. Calculated. Wesley, if you're watching this, you must have gone through everything. The texts, the folder, maybe even the messages I left in the drafts folder I never sent. But if you're here now, then you need to understand one thing. I didn't destroy our marriage. She sat back, crossed her arms, and smiled. Not the fake one from the gala. Not the kind she gave her coworkers. This smile was new. Measured. Steady. You did. Slowly. With silence. With avoidance. With the way you vanished even when you were in the same room. You didn't cheat. You didn't hit. You didn't scream. But you faded. You let me starve. She paused, then leaned forward like she was whispering through the screen. I just found someone who saw me. My body tensed. I wanted to look away. But I couldn't. Because I was watching someone rewrite the ending of a story we hadn't even finished. She was no longer trying to justify her actions. She was trying to reshape the narrative. And the worst part? She sounded like she believed it. I gave you chances, she continued. So many moments when I hoped you'd stand up, take control, show me I still mattered. But you didn't. You always just nodded and retreated. That's not love, Wes. That's cohabitation. Then her tone changed. Sharper. So if you're thinking of punishing me, if you're planning to expose me to friends, family, anyone, don't. Because I've already told my version of the story. I've been laying groundwork for months. You'd be shocked how easily people believe the quiet one is the problem. Especially when the loud one plays victim just right. I felt sick. Not because of what she was saying, but because I realized how much of it had already happened. The gala. The party. The fake smiles. The whispers. The way people looked at me like I was the odd one, the awkward one. It wasn't accidental. It was manufactured. A quiet campaign, drip-fed to everyone she knew. Little jokes. Subtle concerns. He's been distant lately. He's not very social. I think he's just lost in his own world. And now I was beginning to see the full design. I wasn't just her husband. I was her alibi. The video ended without fanfare. No goodbye. No soft fade-out. Just a sudden cut to black. Like she had nothing left to say. Or maybe, like she never planned to say it to me in the first place. I sat there, laptop still open, staring at my own reflection in the darkened screen. I barely recognized myself. Not just because of the beard growth or the hollow eyes, but because I couldn't tell if I was angry or just impressed. Because what Camille had done wasn't just infidelity. It was strategic. It was slow, surgical manipulation. A war without bullets, where the battlefield was perception and the casualties were invisible. I spent the next hour walking around the cabin, trying to breathe, trying to feel something other than disbelief. But the air was too thin with clarity. And then, just as I was about to shut the laptop for good, I noticed something else in the folder. It wasn't a video. It was a document, titled simply, Exit Plan. Docs. 2 words that said more than any confession ever could. I opened it. Inside were dates, names, expenses, timelines, password resets, draft emails, and one sentence, bolded, underlined at the very top. Once he's emotionally destabilized, the rest becomes easy. I stopped breathing for a full 5 seconds. Because in that moment, I understood. She hadn't just cheated on me. She had planned my collapse. I read that sentence over and over again. Once he's emotionally destabilized, the rest becomes easy. It sat at the top of Camille's exit plan like a mission statement. Cold. Focused. Designed not out of rage or impulse, but calculation. And suddenly, every strange moment from the last year replayed in perfect clarity. The way she encouraged me to quit the part-time teaching gig I enjoyed, saying it wasn't worth the time. The way she pushed me to skip my cousin's wedding. How she insisted we not visit my parents last Christmas because of the flu going around. I thought she was being practical. I thought she cared. But now, sitting in a dark cabin miles from home, I started to see it for what it was: isolation. Camille hadn't just planned to cheat and leave. She had planned to remove me. From our life, from our social web, from the world that might help me fight back. And she'd done it methodically, with affection, patience, and carefully disguised manipulation. That was the worst part. It hadn't felt like a war. It felt like marriage. But then I noticed something else in the document. A spreadsheet. It wasn't just about timelines or accounts. It included names. My mother. My sister. My former business partner. I clicked through in disbelief. There were notes beside each name. Comments Camille had written herself, likely meant for Landon or maybe just for her own twisted record. Next to my mom's name. Emotionally reactive. Avoid visits. Encourage Wesley to keep calls short. Risk of siding with him equals high. Next to my sister, Darcy. Used to be close. Create distance by suggesting she's judgmental. Make Wesley feel like a burden to her. And beside my old friend Caleb, the guy I once tried to build a home design firm with. Remind Wesley of Caleb's past failures. Suggest Caleb's holding him back. Separate them gradually. I felt like I was reading the notes of a cult leader, or worse, a psychological profiler. This wasn't a breakup. It wasn't infidelity. It was erasure. And I had walked right into it like a docile lamb, thinking the growing silence in my life was just adulthood. Just stress. Just the natural drift of time. But no, it was engineered. Authored. I wasn't just betrayed. I was rewritten. I closed the laptop slowly and stared into the cabin's fireplace. It was empty and used for years. I could have lit it. Burned everything. Let the smoke carry her words into the air where they'd vanish. But that felt too easy, too cinematic. She had written my downfall like it was a novel. What she didn't realize was that I still had the pen. And I wasn't interested in revenge. I was interested in revelation. I grabbed my phone and hiked half a mile up the nearest ridge until I found a signal. My fingers shook as I typed out a message to my sister, the first real communication in over 8 months. Me, Darcy. I know you haven't heard from me, but I need to ask you something. Did Camille ever tell you I didn't want to talk to you anymore? It took her 15 minutes to reply, but when she did, the message stopped my breath. Darcy, she said you told her we were too intense, that I pressured you. She said you needed distance from people who drain you. I was hurt, but I backed off. Another message came right after. Darcy, Wes, what's going on? What's going on? How do you explain to someone that your wife wasn't just unfaithful, she was removing pieces of you while pretending to protect you? I didn't answer her yet. I just stood there, on that lonely hill, while wind scraped past me like whispers, thinking about the weight of every bridge she tried to burn in my name. Camille had manipulated the people I loved into thinking I wanted them gone. She had used my quiet nature, my tendency to withdraw when overwhelmed, as a weapon. She had set fire to my connections, one by one, and then handed me the matchbook when it was over. But what she never expected was that I'd find her notes. She never thought I'd leave the narrative she had written. And what came next wasn't rage. It wasn't revenge. It was reconstruction. Not of our marriage, that was ash, but of myself. And the first step would be telling my family everything. Before Camille got to them first. I waited 3 full days before driving back. Not because I was unsure, not because I needed more time, but because I wanted the dust to settle around Camille. I wanted her to believe the silence was victory. That I had crumbled like she predicted, emotionally destabilized, scattered, defeated. Let her think I was licking my wounds in the dark. That would make what came next all the more effective. In those 3 days, I called my mother. I called my sister. I called Caleb. Every conversation was different, but the core was the same. I told them what I had found. I forwarded the screenshots, the spreadsheet. I didn't dramatize it. I didn't beg for pity. I simply laid out the facts. And what surprised me most was not their outrage. It was their guilt. Each of them said some version of the same thing. We thought you were pulling away. I told them I was. But not because I wanted to. Because I was guided that way. Slowly. Skillfully. By someone who studied me closer than I ever realized. My mother wept. My sister cursed. Caleb offered to drive down and confront her himself, but I told him no. This wasn't about theatrics. This wasn't a movie. This was about restoring the truth. When I pulled into our driveway, the house looked just as I left it. Neat, symmetrical, deceptively quiet. A Pottery Barn postcard of suburban peace. But now I saw it differently. I didn't see comfort anymore. I saw a stage, and she was standing at the door. Camille opened it before I even reached the steps, like she'd been watching from the window, rehearsing her face. She wore a soft cardigan, No makeup. The exact version of herself that once made me feel safe. Her voice, when it came, was careful. Wesley, thank God. I didn't know if you'd. Don't, I said, stepping past her. She followed me in, staying a few feet back like she knew better than to close the gap. I dropped my bag by the hall closet and walked straight into the living room. The same couch, the same rug, the same quiet hum of the fridge. It all felt eerily preserved, like nothing had happened, like I'd imagined everything. I turned to face her. I talked to my family. Her smile faltered. I told them everything. Showed them your notes. Your exit plan. The videos. She took a slow breath, calculating. I had to, I continued, because they thought I'd abandoned them. They thought I was the one who pulled away. And you let them believe it. You designed it. Wesley, she said softly, I was hurt too. You think this was easy for me? I didn't want it to turn into. Stop. My voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the room. This isn't a negotiation. I'm not here to repair anything. I'm here to reclaim my name. She flinched at that, probably because she hadn't heard me speak with certainty in months. Maybe longer. You always said I was passive, that I never stood up for things. But you know what I realized at the cabin? I did stand for something. I stood for you. I just didn't realize you were leaning on me while digging the ground out from under both of us. Camille sat slowly in the armchair across from me. So what now? She asked, barely audible. I looked around the room. Then I looked her in the eyes. Now, I said, I tell the rest of the people you manipulated. She shook her head, instantly bristling. Wes, come on. What are you going to do? Go on some crusade. This isn't high school. People don't pick sides anymore. They just scroll past. You'll look bitter. You'll look unstable. Do you really want to hand them that version of you? It was a clever attempt, spinning logic into leverage. That was her pattern, dressing up cruelty in civility. But I had already thought this through. I'm not blasting this on social media, I said. I'm not making a scene. But I am sending the folder to HR at your company. The texts, the recordings, the planning file, all of it. Because I need at least one place where your story doesn't get to shape the entire truth. Her lips parted. You'd ruin my career over this? No, I said, calm as ever. You already did that. She didn't cry. Not this time. There were no tears, no breakdown. Just the cold recognition that her story had lost its narrative armor. For once, the script had flipped, and she didn't have a backup plan. I'll pack my things, I added. You don't need to be here when I do. Where will you go? She asked, and her voice cracked slightly, a moment of real emotion. Or just the fear of losing control. I don't know, I admitted. But wherever it is, I won't be invisible anymore. I turned and walked out. The air outside smelled different. Lighter. And even though I didn't have a plan past that moment, I had something else. I had clarity. And in this version of the story, the one I was finally writing myself, that was more than enough. The funny thing about leaving a house you helped build, emotionally, financially, piece by piece, is that the moment you close the door behind you, it becomes just that, a house. Not a home, not a memory, just drywall and paint and furniture you don't recognize anymore. That was how it felt when I finally packed the last box, slipped the spare key onto the kitchen counter, and stepped out of that suburban frame Camille and I had once called a life. She didn't say goodbye. She didn't need to. By the time I walked away, we both knew the only thing we'd shared in those final years was a roof. I moved into a quiet rental by the lake, a small guest house behind a retired couple's property. No granite countertops, no smart lights, no curated dinner parties. Just peace and space. And the faint sound of water lapping at the shore every morning as I made coffee in a chipped mug I actually liked. For weeks, I didn't speak much. I went for long walks. I sat on the dock. I started sketching again, not houses or floor plans or practical things, but abstract shapes, feelings in pencil. I wasn't creating for anyone. Not for clients. Not for Camille. Not to prove anything. Just for me. Then one afternoon, I got a call from my sister. She said, I was thinking, we should do something dumb and spontaneous. You, me, Caleb. Just like old times. I laughed. An honest one. 2 days later, we were hiking through a state park with terrible cell signal, muddy shoes, and too much trail mix. Darcy teased me about my lack of cardio. Caleb brought his goofy rescue dog that kept stealing granola bars. We didn't talk about Camille. We didn't have to. It wasn't about escaping her. It was about remembering there had been life before her. And there would be life after. A few weeks after that, I got a message from an old student, a teenager I used to mentor during those part-time teaching days I gave up when Camille said it was a waste of time. He said he still had one of my old lesson plans, that it had gotten him through a tough year, and that he was now applying to architecture school. That night, I reopened the application for the local community college's teaching program. Not to start over, but to pick up where I had left off. As for Camille, she didn't reach out again. Not after the HR files landed on the right desk. Not after the professional fallout began circling her name like vultures. But I didn't celebrate it. I didn't even follow up. Because closure isn't about watching someone crash. It's about no longer needing to check if they did. I moved forward. And the strangest, most beautiful thing about it? I didn't do it with anger. I didn't need rage. I didn't need a big dramatic send-off. I just needed the truth spoken out loud, claimed without shame, in a place where I could finally hear my own thoughts again. That place, it turns out, was never a building. It was me. So if you're reading this and you've ever felt erased, reduced, rewritten, let me just say this. You are still the author. Even if someone else tried to steal the pen.